Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound radio show, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I'm Robert Winfrey, and I'm going to do a similar apology to how I started last week's episode. Uh, Jeff's been having some issues with Skype, and that's how we record these shows, so he's working on it as I am recording live. If we're able to get that sorted out, he should be able to call in, and we'll do the show normally. But until then, you're stuck with just me, so my apologies for that. We are working on it as rapidly as possible. Again, like you guys, I assume you all know a little bit about how customer service and those things work, so we're working on it. But until then, it's just me, so hopefully Jeff will be able to join us for this episode. I kind of missed talking to Jeff. Again, we couldn't get it to work last week, which sucks because I like talking with Jeff. I like the fact that we have differing opinions. I like that we kind of go back and forth the way we do. So hopefully this gets sorted out. Until then, I'm just gonna soldier on because we had UFC 230 last night, and that was a show of no small note, as a roundabout way of saying that. So we'll be doing that, reviewing UFC 230. Excuse me, not previewing. And we will be previewing UFC Fight Night 139. Because Volkan versus Smith was 130. Yeah, 139. Which will be the UFC's 25th anniversary event. And should be a show. There's a couple of good fights. I don't want to be completely down on it. There's a couple of good fights, but some of them, man. There's a few dogs on that card, too. Let me put it like that. And, of course, we'll go over all the major news from the week. Hasn't been a whole lot, if memory serves, so I'll bring up my list of major news talking points from the last week. Again, there wasn't a whole lot. A lot of it was just kind of gearing up for UFC 230, so we'll get into that. All right. Let us... Where do we want to start with this? Let's just start with the fights. Well, let's do some of the build-up to the fights, because there were a few things that led up to the event that need to be discussed. First of all, there was the issue of a couple of guys missing weight. We had Brian Kelleher, who missed weight by a pound. We also had Sijara Eubanks, who missed weight by a pound and change. She was 127 point something or other. 0.2? Okay, 127.2. I mean, I've said before, that's literally just was it a fifth of a pound? It's very, very little in the grand scheme of things, but you missed by a whole pound. Sorry, I'm not going to... I care significantly less about someone who is, again, like a fifth to a tenth of a pound over when that's all they are. If you're like 0.1 or 0.2 over, I tend to think that should be rounded down, just because that's how I would. Let me put it like this: if you want to be a bit of a hardliner about weigh-ins, and you want to be, in my estimation of things, slightly overly pedantic, I'm fine. I just kind of wish there was some I would argue about, again, your 0.1 over. Like, again, I almost kind of go, who cares? It's almost nothing. Like, it is literally almost nothing. It's very, very close to nothing in terms of how we weigh things. But such is the world we live in, and if that's the way you want to do it, fine. Let's just have some consistency about it, because some places round up, some places round down. I would just like that to be slightly more uniform. We could all get on the same page. But anyways, again, she weighed in at 127 for a flyweight bout. Non-title, so they'll give you that extra pound allowance, which is a weird... Can you also say that? Like, that's a weird policy that seems to exist, that if you're not fighting for the belt, sure, you can weigh a pound over. It just seems weird to me. I imagine the history was just born out of necessity. A bunch of people for non-title fights who were weighing, if you signed to fight at 170 and you wind up weighing 171, it was, again, if you're not actually fighting for the belt, do we care about that pound? It actually brings up, if you are fighting for the belt, how much do we actually care about that pound? It's a whole thing. But anyway, she missed weight, which was, I found that funny, just because, if you'll remember, there was a brief period of time when Sijara Eubanks was attached to be in the main event for this card in a flyweight title fight with Valentina Shevchenko. And it would have just been an appropriate thing in many respects for that fight to have been called off or had to be Eubanks be ineligible to win the belt if she missed weight. And again, look, over a pound is not a small amount to miss by, especially when we're already talking about a non-title fight where they just give you a free pound. She's technically 2.2 pounds over the upper bound flyweight limit, but again, no one cares about that last pound for non-title fights. It's not a good thing. This is the second time she's had weight cutting issues in the UFC. I mean, she was supposed to fight for the inaugural women's flyweight title, but that fell apart when she missed weight, had kidney failure due to her weight cut, and I'm not someone who says that if you have kidney failure, you should be fighting. But if you're having consistent health issues related to weight cutting, maybe you're fighting a weight class too low. And this is the second time for her. This is not a unique thing. So she ought to... We'll get to the fight that she had, but she missed weight. The Brian Kelleher fight wound up being canceled. He succumbed to an illness the day of the event. The results that the reports I read seem to indicate food poisoning, but that hasn't been confirmed, or that has neither been confirmed nor denied necessarily. So I don't want to talk out of turn. That's all I heard. And food poisoning sucks, man. That really, really sucks. So if he did have that, you have food poisoning, you want to die. You don't want to fight. So again, if that's what happened, it sucks because Brian Kelleher is from the area and really wanted to fight in Madison Square Garden, but that fight fell through. We had the Eubanks. We had the 2 issues of weight. I think that was all the major build-up stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into the main event here. Daniel Cormier makes history a little bit. I'll explain in a minute. When he defeats Derek Lewis via submission. This was a rear naked choke in the second round. Cormier he is not the first person to win titles in 2 different weight classes. He's the 3rd or 4th. I can't remember. He's the 4th. Because it was, it's BJ. If we're talking just the UFC, it's BJ, Couture, Conor, and then Cormier. He's the second guy to hold 2 belts at the same time, the other being Conor. Daniel Cormier is in a minor... Again, this is not a small thing. I don't bring this up to be pedantic about accomplishment. Daniel Cormier is the first man to hold titles in 2 different weight classes and defend them. Now, he has not held both concurrently and defended them concurrently, but no one else has defended successfully 2 different titles in UFC history. Because BJ Penn, we're going to go chronologically here, BJ defeated Matt Hughes to become welterweight champion, never defended it. Became lightweight champion and defended that several times, but he never defended the welterweight belt. Randy is in a weird spot because he never actually defended the light heavyweight title. He defended the heavyweight title multiple times. But he won an interim title for his first fight with Chuck Liddell. That was the interim title because Tito and the UFC were having a contractual spat, as they're known to have. Then he beats Tito for the real title, becomes champion, and then loses it to Liddell in his first attempted defense. And Conor has never defended any championship he's ever won. Whereas Cormier had 3 straight-up successful light heavyweight title defenses against Gustafsson, Rumble, and Oezdemir. And he technically retained it after the Jones fight, even though we all know he got knocked out. So, point being that even if that had stood and he had gone up, won the heavyweight title, and defended, he would still get the same accolade. Because that would be successful title defenses across multiple weight classes, which has not been done in the UFC. I mean, if we want to extend major MMA promotions to Pride, then we want to talk about Dan Henderson as well in this discussion. Because Henderson, of course, was the simultaneous 2-weight world champion in Pride. He held Pride had weird naming conventions. He held their welterweight and middleweight titles, but those were the, I believe, 183 and 203 pound championships, because Pride didn't have nomenclature between heavyweight and middleweight. Even though Vanderlei was, again, by UFC standards, the light heavyweight champion, under Pride's nomenclature, he was the middleweight champion. Again, naming conventions. What do you want me to do? But Henderson never defended either of his titles, either. He won their, I'm just going to call it middleweight title. Again, I know, it was actually the welterweight. He won their, I'm using contemporary nomenclature, which is weird. I know, but work with me here, okay, guys? He wins their middleweight title, doesn't defend it, has several fights, a couple of them up a weight class, wins their light heavyweight title from Vanderlei Silva to become the 2 champion, and then never defends that because the division folds. All right, we should have Jeff with us now, so Jeff, welcome back. I apologize to everyone for the technical issues, but Jeff should be here. We're going to double-check this.
It's not your fault. The fault lies solely at the hands of Skype's horrible customer service, Mac's horrible customer service, and bad. They give you all these troubleshooting guides for technical difficulties, and not one of them is helpful. They give you everything except what you need to do to fix it, and they don't update them because it's because of new system updates, and then they don't update the troubleshooting to show what might be causing problems or glitches. So, yeah, all you technical platforms for your bad customer service and help tips, you have these giant help lists, and not a single option is helpful. So, moving on from that,
it's a bit like bit like Schrodinger's technical bug. It's never what you actually. You can find a dozen answers, none of which is actually the one you want.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I've been doing for the last hour, basically.
Okay.
So,
well, we're very grateful we got that sorted out.
UFC 230 was one of the best UFC cards in a while. One of the best main cards in a while.
Oh yeah.
We needed this card badly.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially after 229 and just all the insanity. The MMA. I mean, look, there was a lot of insanity just to get to this card, too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, there was a fair amount of craziness.
The main event for this card at one point was Sijara Eubanks versus Valentina Shevchenko. Yeah. That was when Dustin Poirier versus Nate Diaz was booked on this card, which I think easily. Look, the fight fell apart, but I mean, it made all the sense in the world to have that fight as the main event.
I agreed with that sentiment, yes.
I mean, UFC has done tons of pay-per-view cards without title fights in the main event. There's no reason. We've had worse cards with title main events, basically.
That is also true.
So. But this was all. But I mean, all the chaos aside, this was a good card, and I was very happy. I was very, not pleasantly surprised, but I was very pleased with how this card turned out, and just having a good old-fashioned MMA card without all the BS and everything.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of that, thankfully. Again,
there was some BS, I think, with the scoring, with that 30-26 score in a split decision, which is highly offensive to me. But
there was one. Oh, God, I wish I could get more up in arms over that scorecard. We'll get to that. That was on the prelims, but
and some bad reffing. But it's Dan Morigliato. What are you going to do?
Yeah, that was a really dubious call on his part. But
all right, so your thoughts, Robert? Daniel Cormier is the greatest of all time. What do you have to say?
I don't yet consider him the greatest of all time, but I don't think you can have that discussion without including him. And if you
he's in the conversation for Fighter of the Year.
I think
If
he's
he's
pretty
not-
clearly
if
the
he-
fighter of the year. I
All
don't
right.
think anyone's had a better 2018 than Daniel Cormier. What's he done this year? Hang on, I got to double check this.
He defended the title against
Yeah,
Oezdemir.
he beat Oezdemir, became the double
Beat
champ,
Stipe,
and became
beat-
the first guy to defend 2 different titles in UFC history. Yeah,
And
I mean,
all in
pretty
one
clearly
calendar-
fighter of the year.
Right. And he beat the longest reigning UFC heavyweight champion in history as well.
Yeah, Stipe was on his way to becoming the UFC heavyweight greatest of all time. In fact,
Yeah.
he might have already had that. In all honesty,
Cormier, quite frankly, Cormier, I would say, is a better heavyweight fighter than Fedor ever was.
Got to think about that. I think there's a level of opposition argument to be made at the highest levels, but it's over.
Fedor never had to fight the level of fighters that. Well, yeah, when Fedor did fight Cormier's level of opposition, that's when he started losing.
I would disagree with that. I think prime Big Nog was significantly better than the majority of guys Daniel Cormier fought at
Right.
heavyweight.
His 2 most legitimate wins as Pride champion were Nogueira and Crow Cop. That's it.
Yeah. Again, like if the question, if your assertion is that Daniel Cormier is a better heavyweight than Fedor, I disagree, but I don't think it's wrong necessarily.
He was undefeated. He's still undefeated,
Still
as a
undefeated at heavyweight. Absolutely.
He beat Bigfoot when that still meant he beat Bigfoot after Bigfoot defeated Fedor.
He beat Bigfoot when Bigfoot was juiced to the gills, which was harder to do than once he got off of it.
That fight right before that fight, Bigfoot had just knocked out Fedor. So there you go.
No, Cormier's run. I mean, somebody posted like his run up to this point.
Then he dominated Josh Barnett.
I mean, he
Josh
beats Bigfoot.
Barnett,
He beats Josh Barnett. He beats Frank Mir. He beats Roy Nelson. He beats Dan Henderson. He beats Anthony Johnson twice. He beats Gustafsson. He
but
beats
here's
Oezdemir.
what people forget, Robert. When he had that run against like Mir and Roy Nelson, or I mean after the Josh Barnett win, Dana White was ready to give him a shot at the title.
Yeah.
He was at the not the light heavyweight title, at the heavyweight title. But Cain Velasquez spoiled all that because he didn't want to fight Cain. And we weren't even sure if he could make light heavyweight.
And in some cases, he barely did. And now,
my point is, he was legitimately, and after beating Frank Mir and Roy Nelson, that legitimately basically put him in the top 5.
Oh, he was one of the top 3. He was legitimately one of the 2 or 3 best heavyweights in the world at that time.
Had he actually wanted the heavyweight title at that point, they could have given it to him. But because of the relationship, he was forced to go down to light heavyweight. And thankfully, he was able to make light heavyweight, and he had a lot of success there.
Oh yeah.
Then he
despite all, he's the second best light heavyweight ever, in my opinion.
Here's why I like this argument. Fedor's run was in Japan without drug testing, without oversight. You can't deny that.
I also don't think it's a relevant point.
I think it's a relevant point.
It's only relevant, A, if you believe Daniel Cormier is 100%
Fedor was fighting. Fedor, once he fought tougher opposition, that's when he started getting bad. That's when he started.
Fedor fell because of what? Part of it was a level of opposition. That's absolutely true. Part of it was his own personal refusal to even entertain going down to light heavyweight, and Fedor.
He lost 3 in a row. He lost to Verdum, Bigfoot, and Dan Henderson.
Yep.
Daniel Cormier finished 2 of the guys who finished Fedor.
Yeah.
And you don't think that matters?
I don't say it does. I don't say it doesn't matter. I say proper historical context matters. Where is everyone in their career at that point when they fight?
Okay. Well, look, at that after that loss to Silva, in Silva's next fight, he got finished by Cormier. Dan Henderson fought Cormier. See, his Fedor
That was just
win
about
happened.
when Henderson went on his epic losing streak, wasn't it?
That was in July. No, that was in July 2011.
Yeah, that was in the midst of his real, like, he just beat Shogun after a 3-fight losing streak. He lost to Musasi, got a gimme, lost to Vitor, got a gimme
No,
over
because he
Lombard.
came back. No. Because he came back and beat Shogun. Then he lost 2 split decisions to Machida and Rashad, lost to Vitor, beat Shogun again, then lost to Cormier. So he wasn't on a losing streak. He had a win.
Yeah, he had just broken a 3-fight losing streak.
Right. But he's
The
still
point
Dan
being,
Henderson.
he was not at
He's
all the
still
best
Dan-
version of
He's
himself.
maybe, but he's still Dan Henderson.
So he'll be Dan Henderson
Bigfoot-
until he dies. That
All
is
right,
an accurate
Bigfoot-
statement regardless of
Bigfoot
context.
undoubtedly was. Bigfoot undoubtedly was at that time. Undoubtedly. And that was before Bigfoot went on a big run in the UFC.
No, that was part of Bigfoot's coming out party. That's very true.
So to me, and let's see, the Frank Mir fight. That's another. Let's look at Frank Mir has had this really weird career though.
Yes, he has.
Some really weird ups and downs.
Again, look, if that's your argument, I disagree, but I don't. Again, I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I think
All
there's
right, here we go. All right, Frank Mir. That fight was about a year after Frank, in his last fight, had fought for the title. In his last fight, so he was down a fight in that one, but Frank was not. Like, that was before he went 0-4, basically. So Frank was still considered. You had to still consider Frank Mir a top 5 guy at that point.
Yeah, top 10 certainly.
No, in the UFC he was certainly top 5.
I don't remember everyone who was in the division at the time. That's why I'm hedging my bets there. But top 10 undisputably.
He had just fought Junior for the title. Like
Sure.
It was probably Kane, guys like Kane, Bigfoot, Frank Mir.
It was probably It was probably like nearly this order: Junior, because he was champion. Kane. Carwin was still around, I think, at that time.
It's hard to look up rankings.
Oh yeah, you can't find them. Like, you almost can't find
Here we
retrograde
go.
rankings. It's a weird thing.
Here we go. Heavyweight. So this is let's see. When did Frank Mir fight for the title? This is where it just gets, confusing. Just give me a second. But Frank Mir is still a former champion.
Yeah.
That counts. Former UFC heavyweight champion. So we're basically looking for around May 2012.
Give or take. Go if you can get after the title fight, after they readjust.
Yeah, this is right. All right, so this is June 2012 from MMA Mania.
Okay.
And these are the bloody elbow rankings. So you have Junior at number 1, Kane at because Junior was champ at the time. Yes. Kane at number 2, Overeem number 3. Overeem, I think, had the drug test. Cormier number 4, Verdum number 5, Frank Mir number 6.
Okay, so top 10.
I don't know. I think you could have made a better argument for Frank Mir at the time, because Overeem
Verdum was on a pretty significant hot streak at that time.
Quite frankly, Overeem probably shouldn't have been in the rankings at that point. So that puts Frank Mir arguably at top 5.
Yeah, it depends on if you do want to actually actively disqualify someone.
To me, but you know what? To me, that's still better than what we have with Fedor. What were Fedor's most legitimate wins? Tell me his most legitimate wins.
Let me think. Because again, Nog and Crow Cop.
2.
Yeah, well, you have Nog. Hang on, you have Nog twice. When Nog was undisputably the second best heavyweight in the world. You have Crow Cop when Crow Cop was the second best heavyweight in the world. He upset Heath Herring when Heath Herring was the second or third best heavyweight in the world.
So 3.
Hang on.
3. You have 3.
Hang on.
All right,
The
Coleman.
first, hang on, the first time he beat Mark Coleman was legitimately on a good run.
Okay,
The
like
second
20
time, not
years,
so much. The
20
first
years
time,
ago.
again, it was. Look, of course, it was a while ago. That's one of the reasons this is such an obnoxious topic to hash out, and will always be an obnoxious topic to
All
hash
right,
out
so,
because
all
you
right,
have
so
different
four.
because there's always differences based on
His,
time, and
all right,
hindsight gives us different perspectives.
Kevin Randleman's a wash because it's Kevin.
No,
God
no,
rest
no,
his
no.
soul.
The Randleman win was only impressive because of how it happened, not that he beat Kevin Randleman.
Right. Gary Goodridge, maybe.
I'd have to. I don't remember whether Goodridge was on a good run at that point.
Let me see.
He might have been going into that fight, but he also might not have. Gary Goodridge was that poor guy.
You know, he had a notorious, career. Just
Very.
see Fedor. I think it looked like he was doing reasonably okay.
Okay.
He was 17, but he was 17 and 13, so his record was.
Well, he'd already. I mean, by the time he got to that point, he'd already been fighting for. I mean, Goodridge was in UFC what 3? Goodridge has been around for a long time.
He was back at UFC 8.
8. And he had a kickboxing career before that, I seem to recall.
So let me see here. He was having a decent run before, but I mean, I'm just saying I would put Daniel Cormier's opposition over Fedor's. I'm sorry.
That's all right if you do.
I rank Daniel Cormier's career and his account. He never, not to mention, he never lost to the type of opposition that Fedor did.
Sure, and he's going to retire before he does, which is smart.
Well, let me see.
I mean, Fedor's about to lose to Ryan Bader in a couple of months.
Fedor is 42, and Cormier is about to turn 40. And Cormier, here's the other thing. Cormier started late, Robert.
Sure.
He started MMA a lot like Fedor started in his early 20s, right?
Cormier, I think so.
Cormier was like, let's see, if he's 30 now, he started MMA at like 31, 32 years old. Think about that.
Yeah.
He started I mean, it's a good thing he was a tremendous athlete and wrestler because that put him far ahead of the curve. But he was old for the sport when he started, when you think about it.
Oh, yeah. He's in that respect, he's fortunate to have been competing in the divisions he was.
You basically want to start, if you want to be a top MMA fighter, you basically want to start at like 20 years old because of the damage, you know?
Oh, yeah. And you want at least 5 years of some other competitive combat sports background.
Right. Cormier, because of the John Jones thing, he might not be the greatest, but he's undoubtedly one of the greatest fighters in history.
Oh, yeah. Unequivocally one of.
And you know what? I mean, look, this fight, it didn't really happen or unfold under ideal circumstances, probably for either guy, because Derek Lewis was in an all-out war 4 weeks before.
No. Derek Lewis got his ass kicked 4 weeks before.
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
He won, but
he absorbed almost 100. He absorbed almost 200 total strikes over that fight with Volkov.
He almost got finished multiple times, and I think the fight could have reasonably been finished at multiple points in that fight for him to lose. Dana White did a lot of hard sells on this, but I do agree that Derek Lewis arguably did earn a shot at the title.
I think it's fair to say he was the most appropriate contender the UFC could put together.
It was fair to give him, to me, it's not as bad as when Dan Henderson was given a shot at the belt.
This was more a Dan Hardy situation where, okay, we all kind of know how this is going to go, but he's the most deserving guy you can come up with.
Well, but sometimes those fights have to happen, right?
Oh yeah, I'm not complaining.
Sometimes those underdogs win those fights, like T.J. Dillashaw. Yeah. T.J. Dillashaw was a ridiculous underdog.
I seem to recall. Yes, I don't remember the exact odds.
But you have to consider Cormier is probably one of the greatest UFC fighters of all time. Period.
Yeah. Oh yeah, tremendous fighter. Absolutely tremendous.
Here's what he's saying now, though. He'll probably fight Lesnar next. I mean,
Almost
but look,
certainly.
that's if everything goes well. Who knows?
That fight will happen.
Yeah, but he's 39. He's not injured. I mean, he has a lot of wear and tear.
Yeah, dude was a successful international level wrestler for at least 8 years.
Yeah, but he had wear and tear going into this fight. He almost dropped out of this fight at the last minute because he threw out his back after he sneezed. He had a broken hand. He was recovering from.
Yep.
Going into this fight. Like, it wasn't broken when he was fighting, but it was like in extreme recovery, basically. He had a hand injury. A legit hand injury.
Yep.
So I guess I'm just worried, maybe we get the Lesnar fight in March, but I mean, things have to go right for that to happen.
Well,
and we've seen fights where everything is going right just to fall apart like hours before.
That is also a thing that has happened. That's true.
But look,
he'll get it.
I hope he gets that fight. Because if anyone deserves a storybook ending to his career, it's Daniel Cormier.
Yeah, no one deserves a storybook ending, but
yes, they do.
No, you deserve what you get.
You're negative, Nancy.
I am. And if there was a gun to his head forcing him otherwise, then I'd reconsider my position.
All right, but look. If he gets this Lesnar fight, I hope he never comes back.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's gonna fight Lesnar.
He gets that fight. He has that fight. Whatever happens, it's over and done. And I hope he can ride off into the sunset with his head held up high.
Oh yeah, I mean, I imagine he's gonna fight Lesnar. It'll be the easiest fight of his life for the most amount of money in his career. He'll win.
Easier than Derek Lewis?
Yes.
Wow.
Brock doesn't hit nearly as hard as Derek Lewis.
True. And Lewis did nail him with a couple good shots in the second round.
Brock doesn't hit as hard, and Brock is just as ineffectual off of his back. Brock's a better wrestler in his own right, but he's nowhere near the level of Daniel Cormier.
Any surprises in this fight at all for you?
Nah, I think, if memory serves, this was exactly what I predicted was Cormier via second round submission.
This is almost kind of, I mean, I know I was like preaching that you can't put Derek Lewis in a title fight. And honestly, this was best case scenario because it didn't end up like that Volkov. That Volkov fight was not good to me. I'm sorry. I did not like that fight at all, other than the finish and Lewis's post-fight interview.
Now, look, it was what it was. Derek Lewis has never had great takedown defense. It's never been awful, but it's never been great.
Right.
And no one in that division can handle Cormier's wrestling.
I would say, though, Lewis has done remarkably well for his career considering all of his limitations. You know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Lewis is probably one of the most, and I hate to say this because it sounds like a backhanded compliment, but Lewis is significantly overachieved. I mean, Derek Lewis is the most generic heavyweight fighter you can think of in that he's big. He's a big guy. He cuts to 265. He has a significant amount of power in his hands, but he's not technically proficient.
He is athletic.
He's an above average athlete.
He was a, I mean, before his life went sideways, I think he was a fairly talented high school football player, and I think he was given a free ride, basically.
He might have been. I'm not familiar enough with his backstory. So, above average athlete, terrible cardio, and fights that tend to suck until they reach the finish.
I don't think his cardio is terrible.
It's
That's
terrible.
The thing. I think it's deceptive.
No, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Hang on. Here's the difference between him and the majority of heavyweights when it comes to his terrible cardio.
Yeah.
He knows how he will grit down on it. He will grit down and fight through it.
Okay.
I mean, Derek. I mean, look. You want to know how bad his cardio is? He averages something like 20 strikes thrown per round.
But have we seen the ceiling for Derek Lewis, or do you think he can get better?
No, I think this is about it. He's a really tough out for the best guys. He'll beat the majority of people if you don't beat him. And given the right matchup, he could conceivably win the title on a lucky punch. He is the average heavyweight in that respect. He has overachieved relative to that because he's a very, very good heavyweight. But in terms of his skill set, he's an average heavyweight.
Now, here's something else. Cormier also said he'd be willing to fight John Jones at light heavyweight one more time. And
that's a waste of everyone's time at this point.
And he also said, if the Brock fight doesn't work out, he'd fight Stipe. He'd give Stipe a rematch.
I appreciate that. Look, he doesn't want to fight. I know he's saying he will. Daniel Cormier weighed, 250 some odd pounds for this fight?
251.
Yeah. No, DC. Don't go back to light heavyweight.
He said he cut down from 260 pounds after Thanksgiving for the Oezdemir fight.
Well, sure, that's after Thanksgiving. I mean, look, again, Cormier is entirely too thick through the body, especially for a 40-year-old with a history of weight-cutting problems. Never officially missed weight in the UFC, but look at him on weigh-in day. That man had some hard cuts.
Yeah.
Look, I appreciate his competitive fire. You can't beat John. We all know you can't beat John. Nobody cares at this point. You are an unbelievably successful fighter. You have a tremendous amount of accolades and respect to your name. Beat Brock.
And then John's just going to do something stupid to mess it up again.
I know. That's literally like there's no point to it.
And you know what? That's not fair to Cormier. That's more unfair to Cormier than anything.
I mean, you'll get in the cage, John will beat you again, and then something else outside of it will happen, and everyone comes out worse for it. Just let's not waste everyone's time with this.
Yeah.
And John said he had no interest in fighting Cormier again anyway because he's beaten him twice.
Well,
and in fairness to John, that's a relevant point. Like, I quite frankly, I think they're sick of each other, and a little bit, I'm kind of sick of them and their proximity to each other.
This was probably good for Lewis because he became like this fan favorite. He had like this meteoric 4 weeks where he was like the most popular fighter on the planet. And it sounds like he made out well from this. So
the two major takeaways for me as far as his financials go for this fight, one was his sponsorship from Popeyes, which I'm sure wasn't cheap. And he apparently got guaranteed money for this. No show win split. He just got a flat fee for this fight. You know what? And good for him, man. I mean, Derek Lewis has been vocal about his purpose in fighting is to get better as much as he can and to provide a stable life for his kids. That's it.
Well, it sounds like he's not wasting his money. So, I mean, let's see. So it said his disclosed pay was $500,000 flat.
Good for you, man. Good for you. You got paid $500,000 to go in there and fight.
That's just disclosed, and we know to make this fight, he probably had to negotiate a cut of the pay-per-view. Right?
He might have just taken flat money up front instead of that, but who knows?
You really think he didn't get more than $500,000?
Oh no! I'm sure he made more than that in totality for the night. He made whatever pittance Reebok paid him. He made whatever Popeyes paid him. I mean, again, that's just what the UFC.
But, UFC give fighters other money. We know that.
Oh yeah. No, again, I'm sure he made more than that.
I'm sure they're going to send him, if not a pay-per-view bonus. I'm sure they're going to give him some other incentives.
Hey, look, whatever he was able to get for this, given how it came together, good for him.
And I know there's a lot of things about fighter pay that you can criticize and point at, but we also know that the disclosed salaries don't tell the whole story, and people should be wise to that by now. Si- Signing bonuses are real. Okay, they're very real, and signing bonuses are lucrative, Robert. They are very lucrative.
For some people, yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a fighter with a good record and a name, you can get a good signing bonus.
I'm sure Ben Askren got a signing bonus.
Eddie Alvarez, had like the one that was on the table before he became a UFC fighter. I think he was getting offered like a $250,000 for a signing bonus.
Yeah.
So signing bonuses, Robert, are nothing to sneeze at. Okay, they aren't.
Depending on who you are, that is absolutely true.
Um, but yeah, so I'm sure I'm sure he made close to seven figures for this fight,
Probably in that vicinity.
if not very close. Cormier, the same thing, because Cormier, he's like one of the few high level fighters who is like almost never at odds with the UFC, at least publicly.
At least publicly, yeah.
Right? No, I mean he said last night he's had his issues in the
Oh,
past.
I mean, the very nature of the relationship between promoter and fighter is at times it's adversarial by nature. That doesn't mean it has to be acrimonious.
He's talked about his negotiations with the UFC, like on MMA Hour, when fighters usually get loose lips, and he's sounded very happy with the situation more often than not. So,
and I'm sure they play hardball with each other. That's how negotiations
yeah.
go. Again, that just because you are in some respects fundamentally at odds does not mean that there's acrimony in the that goes through it.
And this fight did a reasonably good gate. I mean, we really needed a good card like this because
we got a couple of less than good ones coming up.
Yeah, and then it's been a bit of an up and down year, undeniably. So, but I'm sorry, I really can't sell hard enough that Cormier deserves a good story. I mean, this alone could have been a good storybook ending for him, and I mean, it could. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 4 months? But yeah, I hope the Lesnar fight happens because you know what? I would love to see Cormier just embarrass Lesnar at this point. Wouldn't you?
I have no emotional attachment to either fighter as far as that goes. If it happens, yeah, Lesnar has no chance.
You have tons of emotional attachment. I see your reactions all the time.
I said these two. I said very specifically to those two.
All right. Well, I just remember how you were doing backflips when Conor knocked out Chad Mendes.
Well, sure. Chad Mendes lost. That usually makes me do a backflip.
Yeah.
Look, again, I don't complain.
What did Chad Mendes ever do to you? Chad Mendes is a good fighter.
I never said he wasn't a good fighter.
All right.
At what point does my like or dislike of a fighter have any correlation to their in-cage abilities?
Well, look. Daniel Cormier is the greatest heavyweight ever. Fedor Emelianenko was overrated.
Dan Henderson was overrated, but we can get into that later.
Yeah, he knocked out Fedor. So there you go.
Did.
I'm just saying the MMA media, the punditry elevated Fedor far more than he deserved.
No, I think he deserved it at the time. I think hang on. I think at the time he absolutely deserved it. The problem was, I think there was a couple of years in there that we did not use to get appropriate perspective.
Had
everyone's polarized on the issue.
Had Fedor gone to the UFC to actually fight tougher competition, I would have had more respect for him. But
at the time he fought the tougher competition, it wasn't in the UFC.
After Pride folded, he should have gone to the UFC.
Sure, after Pride folded, he fought the two best heavyweights.
And he let bad management hurt his career and his legacy.
There's a degree of truth to that, true. But if you look at the 3 fights that he was supposed to have immediately after that. It's not a degree,
Robert. It is the truth. I know my truth.
Okay, but if you look at who he fought immediately after that, it was Tim Sylvia, who was on not only a former champion, but on a pretty good streak, all things considered, in the UFC. He knocked out Andrei Arlovsky, who Dana White had publicly regretted letting go of, and then he was supposed to fight Josh Barnett. I mean, he fought the best guys outside the UFC.
I'm saying after that, he should have gone to the UFC, but he went to Strikeforce.
When Affliction folded and he went to Strikeforce.
And he fought Brett Rogers. And look, maybe you can, but Brett Rogers was never that good.
No, Brett Rogers was not all that good. I mean, again, there's actually an argument that when he went to Strikeforce, that Strikeforce's heavyweight division was at least on par with the UFC's, but no, I would have loved to have seen him
fighting
in the
guys
UFC.
like Shane Carwin, Jr., Kane, Brock Lesnar. Instead, he ruined his legacy. I'm sorry.
I think if anything ruined his legacy, it was just hanging around too long.
And he continues to ruin it right now.
I mean, sort of, but it's in Bellator, and Bellator doesn't actually exist.
He's fighting Ryan Bader.
He's gonna fight Ryan Bader.
Yeah, it's an absolute joke.
It's Bellator. You don't need to say they're a joke. We all know they're a joke. And a bad one.
It's still a joke. It's more of a joke than him fighting Zulu Zeno.
It's not that. No. Ryan Bader's at least a legitimate fighter. Zulu Zeno was a freak show.
All right. Well, I don't like it. Cormier doesn't have those fights, Robert. He does not have those fights on his resume. That says a lot more about his run in his career.
It says a lot more about the UFC's matchmaking practices, which are generally the superior practices, all things considered. I don't think there's a whole lot of
not always,
that.
but usually. All right, I think we can move on from that one.
Yep. All right, your fight of the night. This was a heck of a fight.
You and Pat trashed Joe Rogan a lot, but I think he was onto something when he said this is high level Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
That's
kind of what it was.
That's a very accurate descriptor. Jacare Souza defeats Chris Weidman via TKO in the third round. This was not how I saw this fight playing out. I think I picked Jacare to win. The way we got here was, again, not at all what I expected. If you told me that...
Well, people forget Jacare can throw. He's been a dangerous striker for a long time. People forget that.
I think he's only recently become dangerous. He's had power for a while.
He knocked out Derek Brunson in Strikeforce. He knocked out Okami. He knocked out Belfort. He's always been dangerous. His striking has always been underrated. Now,
been underrated. Was
he an Anderson Silva level counter striker? No, he was not. But his striking has always been formidable, I believe.
Since the loss to Luke Rockhold, yes, he made a concentrated effort to get better at it. But I mean,
his striking wasn't that bad in the Rockhold fight, as I recall. His grappling was generally nullified, but
his grappling was nullified, and his striking it just wasn't at the level it needed to be to win that fight.
No, but I still thought he won that fight.
There was some dispute over the outcome of that fight, as I recall, yes.
I thought he won that fight still, even though I thought it was close, and he wasn't able to use his grappling against Rockhold, but I still kind of felt he won, quite frankly.
I haven't seen that fight in so long, I couldn't tell you where I stand on it.
But look, Jacare is known as a grappler, and I think and Weidman, his grappling is also fairly impressive. He has a good wrestling base. He always has, and he has some decent grappling and jiu-jitsu skills. We didn't see any of that. This fight was wall-to-wall standing.
This was entirely contested on the feet. Neither of them even shot a takedown. There were two scenarios. There was one in the second round where they kind of clinched up, and Jacare from a tie clinch kind of slung Weidman towards the ground.
Yeah.
And then it might have been, was it early in the third or late in the second, that Weidman gets a kind of a body lock, and Jacare just immediately kind of sweeps him, and they both wind up scrambling back up and just kind of deciding, you know what, I'm just not playing around down there with you. Weidman, this was...
Who do you think was winning before that final sequence?
I had it around a piece. I was around a piece going into the third, and they were pretty
Because
even.
it was, yeah, that was the thing. This was like those rounds were tough because the fight was constantly going back and forth, and they were both hitting each other with bombs, and they kept coming forward.
Yeah, this
Especially
was.
Jacare.
I think Jack Slack said it best. This was one of the most Chris Weidman performances ever, in that he looks technically either superior or at least on par with one of the best guys in the world, right up until the last 30 seconds, and then he loses.
Jacare was throwing some bombs. Weidman was throwing some bombs. They clearly both rocked each other at points.
Yeah, Weidman's jab was really good in this fight. He did a lot of volume and combination work.
You're correct, but Jacare had some very good shots to the body in this fight.
Oh yeah, Jacare's lefts to the body
very
were,
well.
Those hurt me, man. Those were some rib roasters Jacare was throwing, and his leg kicks were pretty effective. Then just that final sequence, I think it was real, and this is kind of weird, but I think it was kind of the body work that had really started paying off into that third round. Because right before that finishing sequence, he lands a left to the body of Weidman as Weidman kind of circles, plants, looks to counter. They both throw rights, and Jacare's lands to the temple, and Weidman's hands were not in proper position. Then Weidman falls over like a tree, and the referee decides no, he needs to be hit a few more times.
That's Dan Marigli idiot for you.
It's a good thing Jacare's as conscientious as he is. Because if someone was in there
that was pure class by Jacare.
I mean, if you've got a savage in there like Robert Whittaker, he wouldn't have even hesitated. He would have just kept hitting Chris Weidman until the ref pulled him off.
Fighters are not wrong to do that because they have to keep going until the ref.
Oh yeah.
Basically, but sometimes we see these indecisive refs who don't know what to do in there. And we've seen Dan Marigliotta get like this before. We've seen fights okay, are they about to stop this or not? And then we've seen moments where a fight could get stopped and it keeps going. So, one I clearly recall was Kampman versus Ellenberger, I think around 2012. Do you remember that fight?
Yes, I seem to recall.
I remember a moment early in that fight, where Ellenberger, it looks like he basically knocked Kampman cold, and the fight kept going, basically.
Yeah, there have been those moments.
Now, I will say Kampman was able to recover from that better than Weidman here. Weidman was clear. He was done. He was clear. Even when he kind of turned over and tried to grab, he was still clearly done and out.
Look at his eyes. He's not seeing anything. He's looking through everything. He is not there mentally. That should have been stopped much. When Jacare says, "Hey, you should stop this," that's when, in this instance, it should have been stopped.
And I'm just saying, to me, that just says a lot about Jacare, his fight IQ and his intelligence. He knew the fight was over. And sometimes fighters, they just know in that moment that it's over. And this was a big reason I had Jacare for this fight. And I was off for a couple fights for this card, but I just always knew if Jacare and Weidman were going to clash, Jacare was going to be the winner. I always just thought this. But you know what? I will say this fight was more evenly matched than I expected.
This was about as evenly matched as I expected. It just played out in a completely different way.
Well, it didn't. I thought Jacare would have grappled him, would have gotten him to the ground and submitted him. Is what I sort of expected. But this was a bit different. But Jacare, I still think, even at his age, is very underrated. Jacare, Robert, he's been a high-level fighter for, let's see now, really for 10 years. He's been able to maintain this high level.
Jacare's longevity, especially when you consider that he didn't get into MMA until after he had a couple of jiu-jitsu world titles under his belt.
Right. Now, here's what I would say. I want him to get the title shot, but I'd be fine with a Luke Rockhold rematch. And And here's the other thing. The reason why I like the Whitaker rematch is because look at Mousasi. He tends to do very well in rematches, or at least against Mousasi he did. Because let's see.
I think that's the only rematch he's had.
Well, no, Miller, he won the first fight with Miller, and then they had the shenanigans in the rematch. And then the only other losses he's had are to Rockhold and Romero.
Rockhold, Romero, Whitaker, and Gastelum.
Yes, but Romero and Gastelum were split decisions. Whitaker's like other than Mousasi's the only guy who's like straight up finished him.
Yeah, no, the only guys who have just finished him were Mousasi with that up kick, and then Robert Whitaker because he's Robert Whitaker.
And George Patino in 2003.
That was wasn't that his professional debut?
Yeah, that was in his professional debut.
We don't count.
But
my point don't really count that.
My point is, like Michael Bisping saying he's shrunk, he's USADA, blah blah blah, but he's stayed at a pretty high level.
Now, I don't hate a rematch for him with Gastelum or Whitaker. I would pick Whitaker to beat him. Again, because that was the last time I picked against Robert Whitaker was when they fought, and I have regretted it ever since, and I have never picked against him since that fight because nobody does to Jacare what he did to him.
I think I picked Jacare in that fight as well.
I think we all did, and then Whitaker just made us all look like idiots.
I mean, I liked Whitaker at that time, but no one was doing that to Jacare ever.
Still no one else has done that to him. I mean, even the Gastelum loss.
Yeah.
As embarrassingly bad as Jacare was for a few minutes of that fight.
So if I'm Jacare, when I'm Jacare, I would try to stay reasonably in shape because Gastelum and Whitaker are probably going to fight in February in Melbourne, but who knows? Whitaker gets hurt a lot. He gets hurt a lot.
He's had a few. Yeah, he has had a few recurring injuries. You've got, and I mean, Gastelum's not exactly a bastion of reliability either.
That's what I was about to say. Gastelum is very unreliable. Yeah,
keep him on standby for that fight.
Yeah. And you know what? It might be the same for some for I don't want him to fight a guy like Adesanya yet, though. It's a bit too soon for that. But yeah.
Jacare is my guy. Jacare is great. He continues to be great, and good on him. I mean, this was what
I like now for Weidman, David Branch.
I would like to see Weidman at 205.
Oh, you know what? I've heard about that, but I don't know. You really think Weidman will go up? You think he would have? Do you think he's big enough for 205?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a huge middleweight.
I don't know, but do you think he can handle those? I don't know.
I mean, Weidman's. I have to look up his stats.
Like, would he beat Pat? Would I pick him to beat Pat Cummins? Yes.
Yes.
Hang
on. Just for the sake of argument, here's the light heavyweight top 10 at the moment.
Okay.
You have Daniel Cormier. Let's replace him with John Jones for the sake of conversation. Okay, so you have John Gustafsson, Anthony Smith, Jan Blachowicz, Ilir Latifi, Volkan Oezdemir, Jimmy Manuwa, Dominic Reyes, Corey Anderson, Glover Teixeira, and Ovince St. Preux. I pick him over everyone from Oezdemir on down.
Really?
Possibly not Dominic Reyes, but
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean,
I would want to see him.
He can beat OSP.
OSP, yes.
Corey Anderson, Jimmy Manuwa, Oezdemir.
I don't know. I'd have to see how he looks at light heavyweight first.
Fair.
I would. Corey Anderson, I think might. I don't know. Manuwa, I think. I think his wrestling gives him a distinct advantage over Manuwa. You know what? If he does go up to light heavyweight, just book him against Shogun first. I'm sure he'd be okay with that.
No, book him against Cummins first. Cummins is a useless set.
No.
Pat
Come
Cummins
on,
or who's that other?
Do you hate Pat Cummins that much?
Yes.
All right.
Or who's that other?
I'll be honest though. I don't hate the idea of Weidman going up, but the thing is, it might be too late for his career for him to reinvent himself.
That's entirely possible.
Because he is. I mean, he's not like he's not old, but he's not a young man anymore. You know.
No, he's 34.
He's not, he had his run in that good sweet spot, but he's not at that point anymore.
Okay, yeah, Weidman's 6'2". With
Right.
a 78-inch reach. He's a big guy.
He's big, but he does cut a fair amount of weight. But he's not like the most jacked middleweight either.
No, but he also might, if you don't have to worry about cutting as much weight, maybe you dedicate some more time towards strength and conditioning.
Look, if he wants to try to have a run at 205, I think that's a good idea.
I mean, I think at this point, a lot of my reasoning for that is he's taken a tremendous amount of damage over his last 5 fights.
Like Rashad Evans, him trying to reinvent himself as a middleweight was a disaster because it happened way too late for him. He was able to make that weight, but it was just too much and too late for his career.
Yeah. I mean,
moving up might not be a bad deal for him.
I think you at least test the waters at this point. I mean, because you've lost to Rockhold, you've lost to Romero, you've now lost to Jacare, you've lost to... I mean, Musasi's not in the UFC anymore, but...
If he wants to keep fighting at middleweight, there are fights for him there.
There are also fights for him still at 185.
But the problem is he always gets hurt. He gets hurt so much.
That's one of the things I want to see at 205 is...
He had a long layoff for this fight.
He did. Excessive weight cutting, does have some effect on your ability to absorb damage. Maybe he's taken too much for that to actually be a terribly relevant factor going forward. But, we've seen guys who move up who, can suddenly take much more of a punch than they could.
Whitaker did very well moving up. He did very well for himself.
Yeah, I would like to see him try it out.
I would too.
Even if it's just one fight, give it a shot.
Yeah, I'd be fine if he wanted to give it a shot. I mean, he did want to move up eventually, but we'll see.
We had, oh boy, this one surprised me. Jared Cannonier, man.
Cannonier looked good last night.
He looked great.
I was surprised.
I mean, he defeats David Branch.
I don't know if I'd say great, but it was definitely the best performance he's had in his UFC career.
Man, I kind of feel for David Branch as far as this fight goes because he went from preparing for Jacare to having to prepare for Jared Cannonier. Those are two wildly different fighters, and how you fight. And if you're Branch, your game plan for Jacare is avoid grappling with this man at all costs. Your game plan for Cannonier is force the grappling at essentially all costs.
And Cannonier, he got taken down very early, and he didn't panic. He didn't lose his cool. That's important when you're fighting like a guy who wants to wrestle you.
No, he did a really good job of wall walking, of fighting in the clinch, of getting out once that was able to be done. Right. John Crouch seems to have done him a world of good.
Well, I guess he's the type where maybe fighting at middleweight makes more sense for him.
Oh yeah, I mean he's one of those cases where he seems to have finally found his ideal weight class, and it just happens to be down.
Well, but we'll see.
Wins in 3 different weight classes.
This was a legitimate win for him. So let's see where he can, how he builds off of this.
Yeah. I mean, he's a top 10 guy now off of that win.
I'd be fine. Let's see. I'd maybe want to see him fight Antonio Carlos, like an Antonio Carlos Jr. or a Thiago Santos type next.
Santos would be interesting, assuming Santos comes back to middleweight.
I wouldn't want to put him in there. I wouldn't want to see him in there against like Apollo Costa right off the bat.
No, there's no need for Costa, but you could do... We're going to talk about him in a minute, but you could do Derek Brunson. You could do Cannonier and Brunson.
The thing is, the matchmakers will want to match him up against a guy coming off a win. That's how they usually do it.
Mm-hmm. And
they like to match guys up coming off wins, unless it's like a higher level guy coming off a big profile loss. That's usually how they get it done.
What else has gone on at middleweight over the last couple of weeks? Surprisingly little, geez. There weren't even middleweight fights on the last few cards.
Uriah Hall? Is Uriah Hall still on the roster?
I don't know.
Should Brad Tavares even be ranked number 10 right now?
He's 10?
That seems...
No.
To me, he's still ranked number 10. You know what? I'm with Israel Adesanya right now. F the rankings.
They are weird.
These rankings are
okay.
Sorted.
I know he's coming off of a loss, but Jared Cannonier versus Eric Anders would be a lot of fun.
Who?
Eric Anders.
Cannonier.
Doesn't Anders have a fight lined up?
Eric Anders. I think
he's
right.
fighting Theodorou. Okay, give Cannonier the winner of Anders and Theodorou from 231.
Yeah, that's good. But you know what? They might want to put Adesanya against that guy. That's the other thing.
I think Adesanya is going to get a higher profile fight than that.
Wow, so we had 4 middleweight fights on the main card.
The main card was heavyweight and 4 middleweights.
Well, at least the middleweight bouts were fairly good and competitive.
Generally speaking, yeah. I mean, next up we had our one dud, essentially, on the main card, and Carl Robertson defeating Jack Marshman via unanimous decision.
I think we thought this fight was a questionable, or at least when I did my picks, I thought this was a questionable pick for the main card.
Yeah, they were just throwing another fight on the main card after they had to shuffle around a few of them.
Right. After we lost Diaz-Poirier.
Yeah. I mean, somebody was getting promoted to main card after that, and these guys won the lottery.
Should have been Saunders versus Good.
Yeah, you can make that argument.
Yeah.
But Carl Robertson, just the vastly superior fighter in essentially every area. I mean, give credit to Jack Marshman's chin, because he ate some shots that have put out lesser men, and he kept coming, but he essentially had nothing for Robertson. This was just a much, much more technically proficient fighter, a much better striker against basically a brawler, and Robertson just schooled him all 3 rounds. This was
I have nothing to add here. Nothing to add.
This one kind of shocked me. Not in who won. I think I picked Adesanya to win. The way this happened is kind of what surprised me. Israel Adesanya defeats Derek
looking
Brunson.
like a beast.
This is one of those crazy things. This was probably the easiest fight for him in his UFC career.
Brunson looked shook in this fight, did he not? He looked shook.
A little bit. Once he couldn't reliably get this thing to the ground. I mean, Adesanya was, if he got taken down, he was wall walking, he was clinch fighting well, he was battling for underhooks, he was breaking free. I mean, my biggest criticism of him for, I think, about 4 minutes of this fight was, okay, he's stopping what Derek Brunson is doing, but he's not doing anything offensive of his own. Right about then, he baits Derek Brunson into really reaching for this takedown and catches him with a knee to the face that spells the end. It takes a bit to get there because he wobbles him, hits him. Brunson kind of tries to urge him on, so he kicks him and punches him. Brunson drops. Brunson gets back up. Adesanya punches him and he falls over again. Brunson gets back up. Adesanya punches him down again.
I think they kind of let that go on a little too long too. I feel like he was given too many chances.
It was, if they had stopped it a little bit earlier, I wouldn't have complained. But I mean, in minor fairness to Brunson, he wasn't just like, he was literally getting back to his feet, not just kind of like rolling over and saying, come down. It was like, okay, I got dropped, I'm back up, and you kind of want to like, okay, wait, let's see what happens.
Fair enough. Now, the other thing, those knees were just gnarly, Rob.
Adesanya's a beast, man.
This is the best he's at. I'm still not completely sold on him 100%, but man, if he can...
Dude, get on the bandwagon with this guy. Just
I'm
jump
not,
on.
I'm not ready.
I mean, look,
if he can keep doing this, he is scary.
I mean, are there still tough fights for him? And does he still need to continue to improve? Absolutely. But this is one of those guys on his ascendancy who looks like $1,000,000.
I mean, he carries.
He beat Brad Tavares pretty comprehensively over 5 rounds, and he just smoked Derek Brunson. I don't think Brunson really landed anything effective on him all fight.
I'm just wondering who you book him against next.
There have been some thoughts. This would be two rising contenders, but him and Paulo Costa,
Because
man.
Brunson was ranked number 6.
Yeah. I heard some people mention that, Adesanya versus Costa. And, I think Adesanya takes that without issue, but...
Would Rockhold be willing to fight him at this point? Or
I don't know if Rockhold would be willing to fight him or not.
That's the other thing. I don't think Dana wants to put him in there against like a Romero next. I don't think he's going to want to do that.
I don't think you want to put him in there with a Romero or Gastelum's got another fight.
I don't know. I don't think the other thing is I don't want him to be put in the title situation yet, because you know what? Darren Till was not ready for that title opportunity, and I think that really hurt Darren Till and sent him back, Robert.
Here's what you might do with Adesanya next. Instead of putting Jacare on standby for Gastelum and Whitaker, you put Adesanya on standby.
I love that idea. I mean, if you're that pressed, maybe. I'm worried. I'm just worried because it's weird because you have a legit. He's a legit prospect in West. And you want to bring them along, but you don't want to bring. I felt the UFC. I honestly felt the UFC brought Francis Ngannou along at the right pace. Remember?
Yeah.
But when it came time to fight him to fight for the title, he maybe not choked, but he couldn't get it done. And then he continues to not get it done. But I felt they brought Ngannou along at the right pace. Adesanya, I don't know. It's a tough call for me. Because
it is. It's a tough thing because, look
at
what he's done.
You could put him in there against Jacare, honestly.
You could. Over Adesanya's last 2 fights, him against Whitaker's become a bit of a dream fight for me all of a sudden.
But you could give him a break too. Let's see.
He's fought 4 times this year.
He fought 4 times this year, and he won all 4.
We mentioned Daniel Cormier is pretty much undoubtedly your fighter of the year for 2018. Israel Adesanya is unequivocally the breakout fighter for 2018.
Yeah. You could put him in Uriah Hall. There you go.
No. Even I don't dislike Uriah Hall that much. Adesanya would smoke him.
But man, I wasn't too enthusiastic about the Tavares fight because Tavares is beatable and he always has been. He's decent, but he's beatable. Brunson, beatable, but he's like a higher level of that. You know what I mean?
He's a significantly better version of Brad Tavares in a lot of ways.
Brunson for the past several years has been a perennial top 10 opponent. That's undeniable. You know what I mean?
Yep.
He's been fringe top 5 a couple times too. So
also true.
So this is a pretty solid high level win for him. So I don't know. I'm very I'll say I'm very excited about Adesanya, and I'm looking forward to it. And I hope he can keep this up because if he can become like a future contender or champion, he is a scary looking man.
Oh yeah. He was a scary kickboxer for a lot of years, just smoking guys left and right. This is a big guy with a lot of potential.
He's 75-6 in kickboxing.
Yeah, really great kickboxing record.
I have to say though, I'm impressed the fact that he was a kickboxer fighting a wrestler, and he was able to deal with the wrestling. Because so often we see strikers and kickboxer, they look absolutely clueless when it comes to wrestling.
Yeah, he's very clearly been working hard on that aspect of his game,
Yeah,
and it's paying
I
off.
was impressed. That's what impressed me the most. But yeah,
Yeah, I don't know what you do with him next, but there's a rocket ship that's going to be strapped to that guy's back real fast.
but consistency is important. That's the other thing. He has to, because as the harsh thing about this game is like you could be like just one loss.
You can be Francis Ngannou, and you can be the guy on the rocket ship, and then 2 fights later you're where he is now, about to main event a Fight Pass card in China.
You're Czech Congo 2.0.
Or Czech Congo the original. Ugh, Czech Congo.
You're the next Czech Congo. And I like Czech Congo, but he's still Czech Congo.
Ugh, Czech Congo.
You know what I'm talking about. All right.
Still fights in Bellator.
Quick hits.
All right. As for the prelims, let me run through these. Jordan Rinaldi defeats Jason Knight via unanimous decision, 30-27, 30-25, and 30-26. Jason Knight just struggles with guys who are really good wrestlers and have very physical games, and Jordan Rinaldi has that. Sijara Eubanks missed weight. I talked a little bit about that at the opening, but defeated Roxanne Modafferi via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board.
Thank God she was not in the main event.
That would have been.
You know what? I believe
that
you.
Would have been
that was
that would have been the funniest thing to me, is if they had gone through all the effort, pissed off the fan base, gone with Eubanks versus Shevchenko in your main event, and Shevchenko misses weight.
Eubanks, you mean?
Oh, Eubanks misses weight. Excuse me.
Right. Disgraceful. Just because I don't even believe the UFC was serious about that. I think they just put that in the slot to have something there.
I think they were testing the waters to see how the fan base would react to it, because they never put together anything beyond announcing it, and the fan base reacted the way it reacted.
Quite frankly, I don't even think any commission should have allowed that fight anyway.
There's no reason not to sanction it.
I mean, Eubanks was right to be upset after it got taken away from her, because she did it for all intents and purposes, sign that fight. But man, to miss weight and
badly over a pound.
I mean, thank goodness she was not in the main event. I'll say that.
Yeah. I think the UFC should force her up to bantamweight for at least one fight.
I'm willing to give her one. Well, because she had one other issue.
Yeah, this was the second time.
Yeah.
Again, I'm happy to give everybody one. I really am, because I understand the randomness of the universe.
Quite frankly, I feel like if a fighter does it 3 times, they should get cut.
There's an argument for that. Shaman Moraes defeated Julio Arce via split decision. There was 129-28 for Arce, 129-28 for Moraes, and a 30-26 for Moraes. Weird scores.
30. There was who had 30-25?
26.
Oh wait, I'm looking at a different fight.
No, there was a 30-25 score on that last night, but it wasn't for that fight.
Oh, it was a different fight. Excuse.
Yeah, Rinaldi had a 30-25.
I'm sorry. That score, a score like that should not be allowed. That is wrong.
I mean, it's weird, but at the same time, I can see the argument for it.
I
want to be more upset about this.
You have one guy winning. You have one guy. One judge has the other guy winning. The other guy has him winning 30-26. That's like.
It's weird, but again, you had at least one. I mean, one of those rounds was very close and could have legitimately gone either way.
Because quite frankly, I feel like we need more 10-8 rounds. I think that's a big problem. Like, judges are too afraid to give 10-8 rounds.
Or 10-10s for that matter, but yes.
Yeah, that's another issue. Whatever.
It's a thing. This was a bloody fight, man. Good to see Shaman Moraes having some success. Lyman Good knocks out Ben Saunders 1 minute 32 seconds into the first round. I think Ben Saunders is shot at this point. I mean, dude's 1-4 in his last 5, and that win was over Ellenberger, which I don't think actually counts at this point. Lyman Good looked like a beast here. Once they got into the clinch, he got inside. He had superior leverage. He had inside. His arms were inside immediately on Saunders' neck, whereas Saunders had to go around his. The guy inside has more leverage. He broke Saunders' posture with that, and then just hit him with some uppercuts until he fell over, and then hammer-fisted him into unconsciousness.
He was Bellator's inaugural welterweight champion, then lost the belt. Hey, maybe he'll rematch Ben Askren now that he's in the UFC.
If Ben Askren wants the easiest win of his life, and that's saying something considering his recent level of opposition. Oh, wait, sorry, you meant Good, not Saunders. My apologies.
Yep.
No, Good, I feel Good's one of those guys who kind of got screwed by supplement companies, because he definitively proved that they had given him contaminated materials, and he's currently suing them. But that's why he's been out for so long. Again, he looked like a monster here, but I need to see him against someone who isn't. I respect Ben Saunders' career, but Saunders is kind of shot.
Good's. I don't know how good Lyman Good actually is. I'll say that much.
Which is fair.
I think he's a mid-level. To me he's more of a mid-level talent, but we'll see.
At the moment, yeah. Matt Frivola and Lando Venata fought to a majority draw. There was one 29-28 for Frivola and then two 28-28s. I was 28-28. This was a good fight. These two hurt each other. For the record, I had Venata 10-8 in the second. And then Frivola edging out rounds 1 and 3, which led to 28-28. Fun fight. Fun little brawl of a fight here.
A justified draw.
Yeah.
You know? Which, again, sometimes I think we need to see more.
I would agree.
Maybe not draws, but 10-10 rounds.
Well, this was a result of a 10-8, but
oh, well, because you might have it. One guy gets a 10-8, but then he loses the next 2 rounds, and a judge is afraid to score that.
Yeah, that's true.
The
they
problem.
are. Shane Burgos defeated Kurt Holloway via armbar in this first round, 2 minutes 11 seconds. Really nice finishing sequence here from Burgos, who got hit and dropped. Holloway jumps into his guard, and Burgos throws up a really quick armbar, engages his legs properly so that when Holloway tries what I believe is referred to as the hitchhiker defense, which is when you walk all the way around the outside of your opponent's head, it completely removes. The goal of that particular defense is to release your arm from the tension so that the elbow's not actually being leveraged the way it is in a regular armbar. He couldn't spin around. He tried, and between him not getting his hips around, just kind of stepping over, and the proper quad and leg engagement from Burgos, he wasn't able to step around, wasn't able to complete the escape, got flattened out, had to tap. Nice finishing sequence there.
Yeah.
And then Marcos Rogerio de Lima defeated Adam Wieczorek via unanimous decision. Wieczorek took this fight on short notice after Ruslan Magomedov had visa issues. This was a crappy heavyweight fight. It sucked. All right, was there anything else you wanted to touch on from those, or are we going to move
Nope.
on?
I'm good.
Right. Thank you to everyone who followed along with my coverage of this event. Always appreciated. I appreciate the fact that even the people who kind of try to troll through in my comments do it in a somewhat intelligent and well-spoken manner. So thank you for that. And you know who you are. I'm not going to name names. You know who you are. Thanks to the rest of you for just kind of being generally awesome. I appreciate you guys a lot. All right, this coming Saturday, we have the UFC's 25th anniversary event, and, well, it's a card. The main event, they're back in Denver, which is where the UFC held its first event, of course. The main event was supposed to be Chan Sung Jung fighting Frankie Edgar, which is a perfectly acceptable main event for a fight night card. It's not great, but it's not the worst. Instead, Frankie Edgar gets injured. And
this isn't the worst fight.
It's pretty bad.
Well, if you dislike Yair Rodriguez.
Meaning if you are capable of coherent thought.
All right.
Now instead, Yair
I don't hate
Rodriguez.
this card, honestly.
Hmm?
I don't hate this card.
I'm struggling with this one. I love the co-main event.
I think the problem is Cerrone Perry is your main event. I think
that
we
should
have.
be the main event. Without Edgar in the main event, it should be Cerrone and Perry. I mean, somebody's gonna die in that fight.
It's honestly we've had worse FS1 cards. Worse.
There probably have been, yeah, which is even sadder. But
this isn't that bad though. Benavidez Borg is a good fight.
Benavidez and Borg is pretty good.
Their problem is the fight's happening in a division that's on its last legs.
That is part of the problem.
And quite frankly, you don't have to cut down a fight with it. I mean, and Durandame. Yeah.
Look, Pennington versus Durandame is kind of a nothing fight. Then you have
the
other
Kelly's
two
on this card. He's underrated.
Sorry, who was that?
Chas Skelly is a very underrated fighter.
Well, if we get to the prelims, yeah, Skelly's not
Some
bad.
good My point is there are some good fighters on here.
Yeah, sure. Of the 11
Korean
fights?
Zombie, and look, Korean Zombie deserves like a good fight. You know.
I was fine with him and Edgar. I really was.
Wow, how has he been out this long?
Injury.
What has he been injured with?
Knee injury.
He's had a knee. Wow. So to come back from that layoff,
yeah, because he
beating
came back from his
Bermudez,
military service, knocks out Dennis Bermudez,
and then he had a knee.
He's been out for over another year.
Honestly, this is probably better though. I like the idea of him fighting Yair Rodriguez off a knee injury than Frankie Edgar. Robert.
Sure. And I wish it wasn't the main event.
Now, but yeah, all I would agree with is Cerrone Perry should be the main event. But are these still good fights? Yes, they're still good fights. And you're just being prejudiced.
I'm not that big on Jung and Rodriguez. I mean, is it a fight that makes sense and would be a perfectly acceptable undercard fight? Sure. But I don't know. I'm not all that sold on it. I mean, both these guys have been out for well over a year. I've never been sold on Yair Rodriguez.
Rodriguez is a hot mess. I agree. But I think honestly, I think this could be a fun fight.
I hope it is. I'm not expecting it to be.
All right. Well, you're prejudiced, so it's okay.
Sure. I don't like Korean Zombies or Mexican Panthers.
I'm picking Korean Zombie to win this one,
yeah,
though.
I can't pick Yair Rodriguez against someone who's even halfway good. And the Korean Zombie, for all of his faults, is a halfway decent fighter.
But Rodriguez, I mean, we'll see. Maybe he's made improvements.
As long as he's been out, he better have improved in some respects.
I mean, here's the thing: fighters do get better in the gym, and sometimes they're able to execute those results. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they are. Look, I would say Anthony Smith is capable of that. Is proof of that fighters are capable of making that happen. Is it not? Because Anthony Smith is now a top fighter, and I mean, 5 years ago, I thought that would have been a joke. You know what I mean?
I think okay. If we're taking that long a view of it, yes.
I never expected Anthony Smith to be like this good of a fighter, but now we can't deny. A lot of dedication
and a change to a weight class that's what light heavyweight is.
Yeah. All right, so people's main event.
Then the actual main event, the only fight on here worth actually caring about.
That's unfortunately only 3. To me, the bad part is that fight. This fight's only 3 rounds.
Yeah, somebody's probably going to die before the 3rd round, but this should be a 5-round fight. Donald Cerrone
I'm going
versus
with Cerrone.
Mike Perry.
I'm going with Cerrone.
I'm torn on this because I want to pick Cerrone, but
To me, this is a winnable. It's a winnable fight for him.
It absolutely is.
Because Perry's not. Because you want to know why? Perry's good, but he's not smart. He's not
really
smart.
He's not a very smart fighter. But Cowboy's also, if you look at the fights that he's really struggled in, especially recently.
Yeah.
All right, let me bring this up because I want to make sure I'm correct. You have Leon Edwards, Darren Till, Robbie Lawler, Jorge Masvidal.
And Leon Edwards wasn't a terrible loss for him.
I mean, he got out finished, but
he got outpointed in that fight.
But if you look at some of the commonalities between all those fights, Donald has a bit of a head case, and I think he's talked about it.
Well, he's always had that. He's always had that.
But
he's had that his whole career. Going back to
one of the
WBC.
things that has kind of been dialed in recently is how exactly to exploit it. If you're the type of guy like, a Yancy Medeiros or, a Alex Oliveira, Patrick Cote, the guys who are...
Look,
they're not
dressing up. Robert, dressing up as a Native American is not going to do that. It's not going to get...
Who are not blatantly antagonistic before the fight. I mean, again, Nate Diaz did this to him. Nate Diaz just kind of got in his head.
Did you see what Mike Perry did? That's not going to antagonize Cerrone. Come on.
No, but Perry's also going to mad dog him. And
I don't
Cerrone
think
can
so.
be mad dogged.
Cerrone is better than you give him credit for.
Look, is Cerrone the superior technical fighter of these two? Absolutely.
Huh?
If these two could fight at their optimal, both of them, Cerrone wins 9 times out of 10.
All right, all right. So with that in mind, the reason I'm picking Cerrone is because not only is he more technical, I feel like Mike Perry is just as idiotic and prone to make a mistake as Cerrone has. So I'm picking Cerrone.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If this were 5 rounds, I would pick Cerrone.
I feel comfortable picking Cerrone.
Yeah, I'm going to regret this, but I'll agree with you. I'll pick Cerrone. I'm just now watching him get flattened by an elbow.
Look, Perry is a dangerous striker, and he has very good striking and kickboxing. He had that fight with Paul Felder was crazy.
Okay.
So,
Perry's had some of the most brutal finishes over the last few years. And
I think I liked Felder to win that fight too. So
yeah, the Ellenberger fight, the Reyes fight, the Felder fight.
I don't overlook Perry. I just think this. I think this is a good stylistically. I think it's a good matchup for Cerrone, even at welterweight.
If Cerrone stays within himself, yeah. He's
capable of doing that, though. He is.
He's certainly capable of it. I'm not sure that he will.
It's just, yeah. The problem is he doesn't always do that.
This could very easily be the classic Donald Cerrone. I have a great first round and then get myself psyched out in the second and finished.
We've also seen Cerrone start slow and then he picks it up later. That's happened to him as well.
Yeah. Again, I'm going with Cerrone, but
yeah. Okay, fair enough. Let's just skip this fight and go straight to Benavidez versus.
No, it's on the card. I have to at least mention it.
All right.
Raquel Pennington, who is coming off of a miserable failure in her title bid. Amanda Nunes just destroyed her. But that did snap a 4-fight winning streak, most of which were just kind of meh.
Yeah, she had a.
Jeez.
Yeah, but
it was
also
a good streak. Just if we're talking about the actual quality of the fights, they were all kind of meh. But it was a good streak.
She's fighting the former undefeated UFC featherweight champion.
She is fighting Jermaine Durandamy, who is
the former UFC featherweight champion.
In a manner,
who never lost the title.
Who never wanted to defend the title.
Yes, she did. She just wanted to defend it against Holly Holm. She's the linear champion.
She is not the lineal champion.
She is.
She was duly stripped of that title.
A title she never lost.
Sure, she was duly stripped of it. Which
Prejudice.
No, that's just the way that is.
Sexism.
It has nothing to do with the fact that she's a woman. It has to do with the fact that she won a title,
I'll pick Pennington here.
refused to defend it. I mean, this fight's gonna suck.
I'll pick Pennington.
I don't know who wins. I don't care who wins.
Pennington by decision. There. That's my pick.
I don't care.
Benavidez versus these poor guys.
Boy, this is
Sad.
talk about treading water.
Just make it bantamweight so they don't have to cut. I'm sure Borg will be ecstatic.
They might do that.
It's just
Benavidez
sad
is
because
coming off
it's
of
the
that.
last legs. It's the last legs of a dying division.
Yeah, the UFC doesn't want flyweight around, which is fine. Like, look, the market doesn't want it. That annoys me, but I understand it. Fine. Man, Benavidez did not look good in his last fight.
He hasn't looked good in a while, I think.
Well, he's been out for a while. Because, I mean, he didn't look great against Cejudo, but in fairness, Cejudo's also really good.
Right.
Then he had that long layoff. I mean, he was out for...
Even against and before that, the Bogatinov fight was not impressive. The Makovsky fight was not impressive.
No, and sadly, I think he wins. I mean, Ray Borg is... There's some good stuff in Ray Borg's game, but it's also very scramble-oriented, and I'm not sure he's going to be able to bait Benavidez into that type of game.
I just feel bad like Benavidez was never quite able to have that run because he was always really good, you know?
Hey, look, if DJ doesn't... he would have been the champion if not for Demetrius Johnson.
Well...
I mean, we all thought he was going to be the champion even when DJ was...
he was a top 5 guy at 135 too.
And now he gets to be a top 15 guy
He
at
gave
135.
Before Cody Garbrandt, he probably gave Dominic Cruz his toughest battle to date.
Yeah, prior to that fight, yeah. I think Benavidez wins, but...
Yeah.
I think we all know that the writing's on the wall with this division at this point.
It's like that Sam Smith song for Spectre.
All right, next up we have a
writing's on the wall. I'm sorry.
It's all right. We have Macy Barber versus Hannah Cyphers. Okay, which one of these two is the Dana White, is the Contender Series person?
Let me see.
Because one of them has to be. That's the only reason for this fight being on the main card.
Macy Barber.
All right. I mean, this is an odd choice for main card status. It's probably going to be just a nothing fight.
This is Hannah Cypher's UFC debut.
Oh, they're both making their UFC debuts.
Right. Well, if you count, you can kind of count the Contender Series.
Nah. It's not. Right. It's not the UFC. It's a way to get into the UFC, and it's a legitimate win. I'm not knocking it in that respect, but it's not the UFC.
All right. So Cyphers is not fought on the Contender Series. Barber, undefeated, fought an LFA beforehand. Let's see, 5-0.
Yeah, sure, go with Barber. No real reason. I mean, it's just kind of going to be there.
Kind of a crapshoot, with these kind of fights.
Yeah, it really is. Speaking of crapshoots, most recent season of The Ultimate Fighter winner Mike Trizano.
Ultimate Fighter still exists.
God help us. Thankfully, it seems to be going away.
Nope, they're going to keep it.
Did they announce that?
I believe they are.
If it's not official, I will not let you destroy my hope that it dies.
7-0 versus Luis Pena 3-0.
Again, and, Trizano wasn't Pena on some tough season?
I think he was on the finale. He submitted Richie Smullen. He might have been in the cast. I don't know.
Look, tough is a giant boil on the ass of MMA life at this point. Sure, let's go with Trizano. But if memory
Luis
serves,
Pena, he's the violent Bob Ross dude. The guy with the Bob Ross afro.
Okay, and then Trezano, who won that season of The Ultimate Fighter. This fight's gonna suck.
I'll go with Pena.
I'll go with Trezano, but
I'll go with Violent Bob Ross. I don't have high hopes though.
use this as a bathroom break.
All right.
Then as for the prelims, we have Ashley Yoder versus Amanda Cooper. Cooper got tapped by Dern. Yoder is on a 3-fight losing streak. I'll go with Cooper just because I like her. Chaz Skelly, who is
a good
generally
fighter,
underappreciated, although he did get stopped by Jason Knight.
That was a while ago. He hasn't fought for a while.
He's been out for a while. But he's fighting Bobby Moffitt, who I think is making his debut. I'll go with Skelly.
6-3 though. Respectable record.
Beneil Dariush is still a thing, apparently.
I like Dariush.
I liked him better 3 years ago.
He's had his fair share, but this looks like a winnable fight for him.
He's fighting another debutant in Thiago Moises. He better win this. Because if he loses this, he's without a win in his last 4 fights.
Right.
Because he's 0-2-1 in his last 3. He was knocked out by Barboza.
But he lost to some... Okay, he lost. One was Barboza's a legit opponent. Dunham was,
fought to a draw with Dunham. When Dunham was over the hill, he got knocked out by Alex Hernandez in less than a minute.
Not the greatest, but he's done...
Dariush had a good run. He really did.
Yeah.
I think he's just past that point now.
But he's in a very competitive division.
That is certainly not helping him.
He's in a division where unranked guys can look good against high-level opponents.
Mm-hmm. Then on Fight Pass, we have Davi Ramos. Good for that guy sticking around, man. He's on a 2-fight winning streak. He is fighting John Gunther. I think Gunther's fought in the UFC, but I'm not sure of that.
The name sounds familiar.
I mean, I got Ramos either way, but...
Gunther is from Ultimate Fighter. He did fight. He fought Alan Zuniga on the 27th finale.
Oh, God, that fight was so bad. That fight was so bad.
And he lost both of his fights on the Ultimate Fighter, it looks like.
Ramos is going to run over this guy like a train. And kicking everything off, we have Joseph Morales versus Eric Shelton.
Okay.
Both guys have fought for the UFC. Shelton, 1-3 in the UFC.
1-3, nothing that impressive. And
Morales
let's see.
Fought in the UFC before, at least once.
Joseph Morales. Here we go. Lost his first fight to Davison Figueiredo.
Okay. Oh, yeah, Figueiredo. The flyweight god of war smoked him.
By knockout. He won his first fight against Roberto, so he's 1-1.
Yeah, okay. I knew he'd fought in the UFC.
I'll go ahead and go with Morales.
Yeah, probably. And we have...
That's it?
There's one more that has... because they've announced...
Really?
They announced Rosa versus Smith.
Oh, you know what? I think you're right. That's also on here.
Yeah, so we have
I think that's fairly recent, yeah.
Yeah, so we have Devontae Smith, who is making his debut coming off of a win on the Contender Series, and Erosa, who's fought in the UFC?
Let's see.
I know he's coming into it off of the Contender Series, but I could swear he had a fight in the UFC before. Yeah. Yeah.
Nope,
he
this
got
is
beat
his
by Teruto Ishihara.
Oh, earlier, yes.
Yeah, because he lost to
over 2
Lobov
years
on
ago.
The Ultimate Fighter. He sucks. Because he beat Marcin Vichorek. That fight kind of sucked.
The main
Lost
card's
to
not
Ishihara.
so bad to me, but the prelims are undeniably apathetic.
Yeah, I'll go with Erosa there. Again, if the fights don't deliver, this is going to be a really long night.
just when you say Artem Lobov's name, it just makes me cringe.
Trust me, I'm the one who actually has to watch him fight. The only thing getting me through this card is going to be Cerrone and Perry. It just feels like one of those events, you know. I hope I'm wrong.
Fair
I
enough.
really do.
Fair enough.
Alrighty, and that will be this coming Saturday. I will have coverage in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com.
Hooray.
So stop by, say hello, commiserate with me.
Just look forward to Cerrone Perry.
I am. The thought
And
of that,
hopefully-
if that fight falls through, God help this event.
And hopefully it delivers. Hopefully it's exciting.
If Mike Perry finally has a psychotic break or Donald Cerrone rolls his four-wheeler on himself, like just something. Those two guys,
Yeah.
the levels of insanity between them, and we're counting on them to make it to the cage. Oh, God. I don't know what to do. All right. What's in the news? What anything worth talking about that we haven't already touched on come up?
I don't want to get into the whole Ben Askren Johnson thing. It's just, it is what it is.
We've talked about it a bit over the last few weeks.
I mean,
No, you weren't here last week. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, you weren't here last week.
I was in the chat discussion.
If you do have anything you want, again, we heard Pat say his piece. I've said my piece. If you have anything you'd like to say.
Here's my issue is we should have had Ben Askren in the UFC like 5 years ago or 6 years ago.
I would agree with that.
I mean, maybe Ben Askren comes in and maybe he's the drizzling craps, but sometimes we need to see that. Don't you agree?
Yes. I mean, look, I tend to think of Ben Askren as...
Because Askren has a pedigree that, like, you need to give him an opportunity. Based on his pedigree alone, you need to give him those opportunities.
Completely undefeated in MMA, Olympic-level wrestler, in that he actually went to the Olympics, mind you.
Yeah, he was an Olympic wrestler, competed on the international level, was a Division I NCAA champion, and undefeated in MMA. I mean... You give him an opportunity for the same reason you give a guy like Hector Lombard an opportunity. And Hector Lombard, you would agree, Robert, he was hot garbage, right?
That is a not unfair assessment. That's true.
He was hot garbage. But sometimes you have to see if guys are going to be hot garbage or not, because maybe, just maybe, they'll be a hot commodity, right?
I mean, look, I said it last week. My opinion on what's going to happen with Ben Askren in the UFC is he's going to... I don't know the terms of his deal. I assume, let's say, 5 fights. I assume he's going to win them all. I assume they're all going to be boring fights that no one outside of the hardcore or the very cerebral fight fan wants to see. And after he wins all of his fights, the UFC is simply not going to renew his contract.
Put him in there with Colby Covington. But I mean, like, why do you want Ben Askren at 34? Like, get him at, like, why not get him when he's 28? Like, why? Like, it makes no sense to me to trade Johnson for Askren.
Okay.
I don't get it. To me, like, if you're getting rid of Johnson, you need to get a lot more than just Askren at 34 years old.
We'll see. Early reports seem to indicate that Askren's debut will be against the winner of Stephen Thompson and Robbie Lawler.
That wouldn't be so bad.
I'd be completely okay with that.
I don't know if Thompson or Lawler will be okay with that, but we'll see.
I mean, again, that's the indicated plans. If Thompson or Lawler don't want the fight, they don't take the fight. It's that simple.
So we know John Jones is fighting Gustafsson, and it will be for the...
They will vacate the title between now and then at some point, I assume.
So they're going to strip Cormier, and they're going to put the title on the line for Gustafsson, John Jones, basically. Yeah. How do you like that?
I wish the circumstances were better, but their first fight is, in my estimation, the best light heavyweight fight ever across all of MMA.
Yeah. And
hands down
and
the
people,
best light heavyweight title
and
fight
fans
in UFC history.
And fans trashed the matchup at the time.
I was one of them. I was absolutely one of them that was very dubious about that fight. I ate a lot of crow, happily, because that fight's great.
Media too.
I'm happy to see the rematch. Again, I wish the circumstances were a little bit better, all things considered, but,
I just feel bad for Gustafsson. He's going to lose another title fight.
he might. I'm picking John, if nothing else. But, you know what? If you're Gustafsson and, you're one judge's scorecard away from beating Cormier, and for the record, for those of you who don't know, I have scored that fight for Gustafsson every time I've watched it.
And I didn't get to say it last week, but we got to give Anthony Smith a lot more respect. And even at light heavyweight, he's deserving, I think, of a lot more respect these days, don't you think? Because that was a good performance against Oezdemir.
Yeah. I agreed with you. I think I said it last week. He's undeniably one of the top 3 or so guys in the division right now. He's on a really good run. He salvaged a middleweight career by going up to light heavyweight, and he's fighting the best he's ever fought. He's smashed a few dudes. Good for him, man.
He's having
He's
success.
fought for everything he has. That's a guy who was fighting tough regional fights for years in tough regions. That's a guy who has just put his nose to the grindstone for a long time, and it's paying off for him. And if that doesn't warm the cockles of your heart, you are more dead inside than I am, and I was at 31.5% last time I checked.
Do we have a new date for Joanna versus Valentina yet?
They're the co-main event for 231, I believe. Because you have Holloway versus Ortega. Yeah, aren't they the co-main event for that? Yeah.
Okay. So UFC will be So UFC announced their first quarter of events for 2019. The dates and locations. So UFC on
Brooklyn, Anaheim,
the
Brazil.
The first ESPN Plus card for UFC will be January 19th. So this will be an ESPN Plus event at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. 233 will be at my neck of the woods, Honda Center in Anaheim. January 26th.
Brazil for ESPN Plus again.
On February 2nd,
They're
location
in
to be
for
decided.
234.
That will likely be the site of Whitaker versus Gastelum. Fingers
Hopefully.
crossed. Hopefully,
Their first show on ESPN proper will be in Phoenix.
February.
17th.
Hopefully they can put a decent card together for that.
They've kind of been mentioning that the fight they want to main event that is Lawler versus Thompson, which I'm all for.
Well, maybe it'll be Lawler versus Askren.
We'll see. Again, there is no actual announce.
You do not like that idea. You do not like that idea at all.
I'd be okay with it.
No, you wouldn't.
Sure,
no,
I
you
would.
You don't have to lie, Robert.
Watching Ben Askren smother hump Robbie Lawler, yeah, I'd be okay with that,
okay.
actually.
UFC 235 will be in Las Vegas on March 2nd. Would probably be the ideal location and time for Lesnar versus Cormier, if that fight happens.
Yep.
We'll see though.
I wonder if they're going to keep the numbering system the same, or if these UFC on ESPN Plus are just going to become UFC Fight Night.
UFC.com. Well, UFC.com is calling the Las Vegas card in March UFC 235. So they are keeping.
Sure, I'm looking at the ESPN stuff specifically because.
Technically, Robert, the Fox cards don't have numbers at all. It's just
I just refer to them as UFC Fight Night 1 whatever.
Yes, but technically they stopped numbering the Fight Night cards.
Sure, they don't want to seem as old as they are because they're perpetually stuck in the early 2000s with crappy new metal, and Dana White still thinking he might regrow his hair.
Oh my God! Oh boy! All right, but 235, but they are keeping the pay-per-view events numbered for now. Yeah. So that'll be March 2nd.
You know what? Next to that, I'm just going to keep track of these ESPN Plus cards as fight nights, and I'll do ESPN as because I have UFC for the moment. A UFC on Fox card is UFC on Fox number.
they're calling them fight nights, so
That I hope they do. I hope they just keep that because it's easier to keep track of. I'm not gonna divvy these things up
in
across
March. All right,
three
and so
different
March 30th.
broadcast networks.
So look, so they'll have a fully ESPN fight night in February, and then another one on March 30th will be the second. So I don't know how this ESPN deal is going to go, but we'll see.
There's only one way to find out.
I mean, listening to Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman talk about MMA makes my ears bleed.
Ditto.
Like it sounds like they're being held hostage and forced to talk about it, basically.
Which is, oh god, it's
worse.
Look, those
worse
two are at this point basically caricatures of themselves anyway.
Yeah.
But now you're making them be caricatures of themselves in a sport they don't actually care about.
I mean, they have been covering it a little bit more, but I don't know. I need to see it to believe that ESPN is really on board with the sport.
I mean, hey, I'm sure they'll give Karen Bryant a half-hour show on ESPN proper where she can continue talking about how much lingerie has been locked in drawers of her closet for how many years.
Don't be mean about Karen Bryant.
I don't understand how she's still a thing. I just don't.
Oh, she works hard, though.
I'm not knocking her work ethic. I'm sure she is well liked.
Worked in
if
TV
she wasn't,
broadcasting.
she wouldn't be in the position she's in. I just don't know why they haven't found someone better by now. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, they have Kenny Florian, and he's very good at what he does. Kenny Florian's a good broadcaster.
Yeah, Kenny Florian can host the desk.
Brian Stan was a good broadcaster too, but he moved into another job. So
yeah, you know what? And I miss Brian Stan on commentary, but if he wanted to be with his family, Godspeed, man. I can't knock that one iota. Related to 230. Sorry, you just reminded me of this.
Yeah.
God bless Paul Felder on commentary.
He was really good last night.
I mean, there was one exchange in particular where somebody brought up the old adage that, you learn more in defeat than in victory, and Paul,
Right.
I imagine he looked at Joe and went, I don't think that's true. I think that's just something we tell ourselves. Like, the only thing I learned from the Mike Perry fight was that I really hate losing and not to throw a spinning back fist when my arm's already broken.
That's really good.
Yeah, you know what? Just thank you, Paul Felder. You are pretty darn good at what you do. You might be the best color guy the UFC has right now.
Cruz is really good too, though.
I prefer Cruz because I'm a very analytical fight fan. But
Cruz
he's
breaks
also not
things
everyone's
down
cup
really
of tea.
well.
Paul Felder is more accessible.
I agree. Cruz has more of he's a bit more prickly. And that's fine. I think that works sometimes because sometimes I enjoy Cruz's prickliness. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's only so much good old boys like Gold. Like, one of the things that really bothered me about like Goldberg and Rogan, for example,
Okay.
when one of them would say something stupid, and they both did a lot, the other would just kind of laugh and go along with it. The number of times they actually said to each other, "No, that's wrong. Here's why."
Here's my problem with Goldberg. By the end of his UFC career, it felt like he wasn't even trying.
You know what? I rewatched a few fights from, I forget who it was. It might have been Max Holloway. This was a few months ago.
Yeah.
And watching some of his older fights when Goldberg was commentating, and I think what I finally was able to really kind of nail down what started bothering me about Mike Goldberg as time went on.
Well, which was what?
I think he was completely and utterly unprepared to call the sport as it evolved.
I think that's fair because
I mean, if you
specifically, I felt like in some of his last events, to me there was so much dead air. It felt like Joe Rogan was talking to himself a lot of the time, and Goldberg couldn't be bothered to even commentate.
Yeah, he was phoning it in towards the end, and again, it might have been I think I remember when I realized that it was the Ortega versus Guida fight.
Now, look, should Goldberg have been given a better send-off, considering his history and tenure with the organization? He was the voice of the UFC for years.
Yes, he was.
You know, he should have been given a better send-off. I would agree with that.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but
All right,
I see the point. Let me say it like this. I'm not sure I agree, but I see the point.
Here's my thing. Goldberg helped carry the UFC into a new era and was the voice of the UFC for one of their hottest periods. That means something, you know?
Yep.
I mean, now I agree with you. He didn't really evolve with the sport, and I felt like, to me, there were a lot of instances where he just didn't seem prepared at all and just wasn't. And to me, this was even before he ultimately left. I felt like he wasn't even really commentating. And you really
God. I mean, it's crazy that a guy as robotic as Goldberg got more robotic towards the end.
But it felt like all he was doing was like the intros and like it's all over was what it felt like.
Whatever soundboard they had plugged into Mike Goldberg, a couple of the buttons broke.
But does he belong in the UFC Hall of Fame? For example, I think he does.
In their contributors wing, yeah, I can see that.
Because you can't tell me his voice was not a part of the UFC's growth. You can't tell me it wasn't. You can't tell me it wasn't.
For it. I don't think we'll ever actually know the degree to which he contributed effectively, but he was the guy in that spot for those years, and that does deserve recognition.
And for all intents and purposes, he represented the company well, and all of that. Now, but yeah, that's all I really have to say. I don't really have anything else to add on the subject. But
okay. Now again, if he goes into the Hall of Fame at some point,
but Paul Felder, love him. He's fantastic. I love his work. He when he's ready to retire from fighting, I think this is what the UFC should, and ESPN most definitely should keep him on.
Go out of your way to keep that guy happy as a
sign
broadcaster.
him for yeah, I would say sign him. You want him on board. I could listen to Felder analyze and call fights for the rest of my life, basically.
No,
he's that good.
I was shocked.
He is that good.
Because he debuted in commentary for the Contender series. I was shocked at how good he was. I was not expecting him to be as good as he was at all. He was polished. He was informative. He was accessible.
Right.
He was, enlightening.
He was everything you wanted. It's important to me because I want fighters to have it's important that they have opportunities and careers after fighting, and the broadcasting is a big part of that, right? So, yeah. I hope that is maintained on ESPN, basically.
Yeah,
I hope
treat that guy right. And keep him in that position because he does a great job. So I just wanted to give him kudos for that because I hadn't before and I meant to. So,
all right.
Is there anything else you wanted to touch on, or are we ready to get out of here?
I think we're ready to get out of here.
All right. Again, we missed last week due to technical difficulties. So what do you got to plug?
So next movie will be Overlord, and then Wreck-It Ralph 2, Ralph Breaks the Internet. So we'll be having early reviews of those. Check out my review of Castlevania Season 2 on Netflix. Just got picked up for Season 3. And my Incredibles 2 Blu-ray review. If you also Daredevil Season 3, check out my interview with Wilson Bethel, who played Bullseye this season. Check that out. And happy holidays. We're in the holiday stretch of the year now, so happy holidays, everyone, and to you as well, Robert. And I'm glad we got that technical thing fixed. No thanks to Mac and Skype.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. I'll see you next week.
Thank you, guys.
All right, as for myself, this Tuesday, Mark Radulich and I will be on TV Party Tonight reviewing the latest season of Netflix's Voltron, Legendary Defender. I'll warn everyone, I loved it. Mark seems to have loved it. Those shows, the shows where Mark and I both agree, we tend to find one thing, one minor little insignificant thing, and argue about it for 40 minutes. Because we have to fill airtime. So tune in for that. Should be fun. We've had a lot of fun reviewing that series to date. I'm a big fan of it. So check it out on Netflix if you have it, and by all means, continue to tune in for TV Party where we talk about it more in depth. Next week we'll be back here. We will again review UFC Fight Night 139, and we will preview UFC Fight Night 140. I want to double check something because they announced some broadcast start times last night, and I know that the Blades versus Ngannou event is going to start at some stupidly early point in the day for me. But I think they said Ponzinibbio versus Magny was going to start. Why are they starting so early? They're in Argentina. They might have lied to me on the broadcast last night. That would not be a first time the UFC has done that. Because no, that seems like it's a normal time. Main card's going to start at 8 p.m. my time, so 10 Eastern. Yeah, Blade versus Ngannou is going to start at like 4:30 in the morning my time because they're in China. Alright, I assume that either John Anik misspoke or I misheard then. Okay, so we'll be back next week. And we'll preview Magny versus Ponzinibbio, which is... Let me have a look at this real briefly. Magny and Ponzinibbio is a fine fight. Lamas and Elkins is just kind of there. Khalil Roundtree fights a nobody because the UFC likes him, so they're going to give him easier fights. I mean, Roundtree's coming off of that win over Gokhan Saki. But still, man, Roundtree's just not all that great. Cesar Fajea's fighting. I mean, it's not great, but on paper it's at least on par with next week's card, if not better, in some respects. Okay. So we'll be back next week for the old review preview show. Until then, again, check out my coverage of UFC Fight Night 139 coming this Saturday. You can read my full report of UFC 230. All of that is in the MMA zone of 411mania.com, so please check those out if you're so inclined. You're listening to a relatively small-scale MMA podcast. I assume you are so inclined. Until next time, stay safe, everybody. Please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.